on the island that I live in, there was recently a house that caught on fire. Father and son were the first ones on the scene. They kept the fire from spreading. The two of them together, they were, watching because there was trees and it could have, spread. They couldn't save the house. They had to wait for the fire department to come, but they were there together. I was asking them about it, like, how are you feeling? Like, I'm thinking, like, let's do maybe some somatic exercises, because to me, that would feel traumatic. They were fine. They were really empowered. They were really proud. It was a bonding experience. They just felt like heroes and amazing, right? Now, imagine the same scenario, but it's one person all on their own. That could be significantly more traumatic. It depends on the person, right? Like Gabor Mate says, trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens within you. So each person is different depending on their resiliency.
Hey everyone, welcome to my podcast, Fatherhood from the Heart. My name is Efrain Martinez Hodia, and I'm a father of 6 amazing children, a long-time educator, and a coach. I created this podcast to inspire and open the hearts of fellow men, fathers, and parents who want to grow and develop a greater connection with their children, their partners, and themselves. It shall also inspire in looking at the importance of our personal growth, the desire in looking at old ideas through new lenses, and the discoveries of our hidden potentials. I'm so glad you're joining me today to listen to my podcast. My guest today is Sandika Joy Evergreen. Sandika is a dedicated coach who believes that everyone deserves healing and support. Through her work, she creates a safe, compassionate space where clients can address emotional challenges and shift their mindset towards empowerment and self-trust. Sandika specializes in helping individuals heal the root causes of their struggles, including unprocessed trauma and limiting beliefs, allowing them to live more authentically. She is trained in the Gentle Trauma Release (GTR) method and Internal Family Systems (IFS) model, which she uses to guide clients through lasting transformation by addressing trauma at its core. When she's not coaching, Sandika splits her time living off-grid on a remote island in British Columbia, Canada, and under the sun in Mexico, offering retreats and empowerment adventures for those looking to reconnect with nature and themselves. Hello, Sandika. Welcome to Fatherhood from the Heart, the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Efrain. Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to see you again.
And Sandika, I'm so glad to have you on the show today. We've met in Mexico while I was doing a little bit work away. You were already working on your career, and we met on the beach. We talked about all the wonderful things that you're doing. Would you be so kind and introduce yourself a little bit to the audience and tell us what you do and a little bit about your life?
Absolutely. And I just want to also say, it was so lovely meeting you on the beach, because we had the same ritual of after at the end of the day around sunset, doing the walk all the way to one side to the other. And I always saw you carrying this little baby here, and you had such a nice calm energy. And we smiled, and I always thought you seemed like such a nice person. And then when I got to know you and found out you were in the same industry, then that was just a bonus. So yeah, I'm doubly excited to be here with your audience and to connect like this. And so, yeah, when I was in Mexico, I work remotely with clients from all over the world. So I'm a coach, and I focus on trauma release and empowering clients. I'm a life coach. At a certain point, we start moving forward with life, but really realized that with coaching, there was always this trauma that needed to be addressed. So I did train to focus more on that, and also my own personal experiences in my life. It was something that I was curious about and interested in. So that is a really important element in the work that I do. It's absolutely phenomenal to watch people come in and transform and be so vulnerable and so brave and just so willing to do the work that's needed so that they can show up in their lives more their true authentic self. So that's really what I do, everything on Zoom, which is amazing that we can do that now. So, I can meet people in Europe and Canada, Mexico. It's just awesome. I love it.
That's beautiful. And I love that you say it with such radiance in your face. Would you say that this has been your calling? Have you always wanted to be a life coach, or was this something that that life brought upon you?
That is a great question. I think, yes. When I was a little girl, I used to have such a vivid imagination, and I would often play these kind of life roles, and teacher was one of them. I really loved like the idea of having some kind of knowledge and helping people and teaching them. And so that's always been in my heart, and using my imagination and being really in touch with my inner
Mhm.
child. That is something I really bring into coaching sessions. So I love how unique each session can be. So it does feel like that part of me, that part of my spirit gets to be at play. And I've always been interested in people's stories. So not so much the chit chat. I'm like, I get really excited when it's like, oh yeah, let's go to that deeper level. I want to hear like your life story and what you're about and where you're going, and what's really going on, not just, oh, I work at blah blah blah. Like that,
Mhm.
we have to do that to a certain point, but you know I think it's really interesting to be seen and to see others. So I'm fortunate that I get to do that in my work. So it was a process and a journey to get there for sure, but now I've been doing this for uh close to 7 years, I think. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's
That's some
been great.
time.
Yeah.
Mhm. Wonderful. And your focus is working with the IFS system, correct?
I do. Yeah, I work with IFS, and I'm also doing gentle trauma release, which is very somatic. So they both are, I always say it's like two sides of the coin to help work with trauma.
Mhm. Can you tell us a little bit about the two systems?
Absolutely. Yeah. Which one would you like to hear about first? IFS?
Go for it.
Yeah. Well, so IFS, I love so much because it's really working with these different parts of ourselves. And for me, really, healing from trauma is when you start seeing something from another perspective. You've probably experienced that many times in your life where, once you have that cognitive shift or that perspective change, you can't go back from that. It's different. So it's
Mhm.
the same thing, like a metaphor I like to use to explain IFS in a nutshell is, imagine you were driving in traffic, and this person is just driving recklessly and cutting you off, and you would have every right to just think that person is the worst, like they're being awful. You'd have a lot of different words you would probably call them, honk your horn, right? And then let's say later on your drive, you're at a red light and that person is next to you, and you're about to roll down your window and really give them a piece of your mind. But you notice as you're doing that they're like white knuckling the steering wheel, and there's just
Mhm.
beads of stress coming down their face. And in that moment, you go from thinking this person is the biggest a-hole to, oh my gosh, this person is in need. You notice also that there's like
Mhm.
this injured child in the back seat. And it's like that, boom. You realize from not liking this person at all, having this idea about them, to how can I help? This person's trying to get to a hospital. Maybe I can call the hospital in advance, and all these different things that you could do to help them.
Mhm.
So, in the same way with our own parts of ourselves, and these parts of ourselves, they often are doing roles because of traumas in our life. Like, usually, when you start getting curious about getting to know them, and I'll give you an example in a moment of what these parts, what their roles can be. You realize, wow, this part has a good intention. Even this part that I, for so long, was so frustrated about is trying to protect me, even though it's mostly creating more of the problem I don't want. It has a really, really good intention. So lots of the parts that I work with my clients would be, let's say you have a part of you that is just numbing you, just making you be dissociative, just, getting you out of your body. And you'd think, well, why would you want that? How could that help at all? I'm depressed, I'm numb. Like, how is that helpful? But when you get to know that part of you, if you can have a conversation, and that's where having someone like me, a coach, as a mediator, because the client at the beginning, it can be really hard to have that conversation, that dialogue from a neutral place, from a curious place, because they might be so frustrated. And that frustration is just another part of them. So you realize as the more you dig, there's like all these different parts that start coming in, and it gets really interesting where you could see that frustrated part. It might have a form, a shape, and you get to know it, and you can ask that part, would you give space? Could you step back so that we can really get to know this other part that's numbing and causing all of these different issues? I know you're frustrated, but can you give us a chance here? And so often these parts will be so receptive to that when they're just seen and heard and witnessed. They do want, these different parts to not be disrupting so much. So it's fascinating, and it always ends up coming back to, you know, traumas, early childhood traumas.
Yeah.
I love it because it can help people remember things that maybe they didn't think were traumas. Like you can get back to a memory of, oh, right, in fourth grade, I went to school and all the kids that day decided that they were going to ignore me. And then you can be with that younger child and really be the hero for them. So this is what I love about IFS, is because I'm such a sci-fi geek, is that with IFS and this parts work, you get to really alter time. You can go back in time and be with that younger you, and
Mhm.
and coach them and mentor them. Like I've done lots of parts work with myself where I've gone back to very strange moments in my life, very awkward, very embarrassing moments in my life, and if I had just had a coach there, like, it would have made all the difference. So I've gone back and just been with myself. It's like, it's reparenting yourself. It's
Mhm.
bringing
Mhm.
that parent compassion and that mentorship to yourself. And I've, helped my own self through these awkward, embarrassing moments so that she was fine. And then she was like, this feels so empowering. She was great. And then that's now a cognitive shift. When I think back to that memory, I don't see it in that old way anymore. I have this new experience. So it's really phenomenal, and it's very embodied, helping clients to be in the body, which is where trauma is stored, in the body. So we need to be in the body as much as possible. And then yeah, it gets to be really interesting because a lot of my clients, suffer from intrusive thoughts. A lot of them have a lot of OCD symptoms. And when in the moment, because life goes on, they now have a tool. Oh, right. It's that part of me that's showing up. I can just take a breath and I can just check in and say, hey, like, I see you're showing up right now. What are you afraid would happen if you didn't show up? And keep on working with those parts. So it's building a relationship, really.
Oh.
So it's
And it's such an
it's a
important it's yeah, and it's so important to help people recognize these pains that they carry, that we all carry around, right? And have such a hard time letting go. And when those fester, eventually that does translate into physical disease and illness. So to allow people and to be part of that is also such an important and incredible work. Can you now tell us a little bit about the gentle release?
yes. So the gentle trauma release method is amazing. It's a whole training that I I received from a mentor who I used to work with at a coaching school. She's a psychologist and just brilliant. And she developed this method so that coaches and counselors and therapists would have more tools for trauma, because just coaching isn't enough. Just empowering people isn't enough. We just keep on running into these blocks that people have. And so they'd reach certain levels and then back down. So the gentle trauma release method is somatic. It's based on the polyvagal theory, if you've heard of that, where what we're wanting to do is gently stimulate the ventral branch of the vagus nerve, which runs all throughout the body. And when we do that in a safe container, especially with somebody where you're making eye contact and you have that rapport like a coach. So I'm building, that's also a part of it. So just my presence with the client so they're not alone. And then also we're very gently stimulating that nerve. And it's wonderful because they learn a tool that they get to use on their own between sessions. So I can give you an example. So that nerve runs through your hands, it's in your legs. So one of the movements that we're doing, and you just sit in a chair, you don't have to be doing anything wild. It'd be rocking back and forth. So we call this the rock and soothe. And that's one thing that we do the whole time. We add some eye movements. We do a little bit of humming and counting because that nerve runs in the throat. So it's phenomenal. So what that would look like in a session would be having, first of all, I really get to know what symptoms clients are experiencing right now. It's a little bit of the detective work. I send them a document ahead of time so that we can sort of find out in the first session what would be a good trauma that we could release or neutralize is another way to say it. So let's say you were telling me about an event that happened in your life. You know, we could go back to that grade 4, nobody talking. I know that didn't maybe happen to you, but that's a good example. And if you were telling me about that memory and actually feeling it as you're telling me, you're like, wow, it feels like I'm there again. Like it feels like I could almost cry. That's when I know, okay, that's great. We can begin. We would move through a few rounds of these movements very gently. And then at the end, I would ask you, you know, how does it look now when you think back to that memory? And because you've stimulated that ventral nerve, okay, and the science behind that is it is one way that we can help the body release the trauma, switch out of fight, flight, freeze. So the body now realizes, oh, that did happen, because when you're telling me about it, it's activated. That did happen, but now it's not happening right now. So when trauma is stuck in the body, it's like the body's kind of looking like a lens at everything, like if that trauma still happened. So it's phenomenal. People will say, often I hear people say, it's a lot more distance. I remember it happened, but it's like I can let it go. Rather than looking through my own eyes at that memory, it's more like I'm looking at a scene. So I'm not like I be able to cry now. That emotion isn't so attached. And then also, I can sometimes bring in a little IFS work where I can say, okay, so now that we've done that part, if you could enter the scene, if we had a time machine and you could go be with that younger self, what would you do? Or is there anything left? If it was a memory where you're older, is there anything left over that you would want to do? Some people might want to fight back in the moment they couldn't freeze. They'd be like, yeah, it feels like my arms want to do something. So then we would actually engage in that, releasing that energy from your arms by reenacting, you know, what did your body want to do that it couldn't do, and now you can. And then yeah, it's permanent, which is amazing. So imagine if you had like 10 big events in your life that really altered you, really changed you, and that trauma stuck in your body. Even if you only addressed half of that, you would notice significant changes in the symptoms that are
Mm.
presenting themselves. So it's really exciting. So that's why it's awesome to see, sort of, rather than managing symptoms, going to the root, and then let's see what
Mm-hmm.
happens to those symptoms. Some of them can go away, or they become much more manageable. And I think we always have to sort of work with our thoughts and gratitude and all that stuff, and working on our goals and those kind of things. That's all wonderful, but so much easier to do, even though it's still hard, but that much easier and hopeful when you're not bringing all of this along with you.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. How can we help prevent trauma, or can we even do that? We are so much more aware of these things nowadays. I think that the older generations and we are carrying a lot of trauma even from our parents or from our grandparents or great grandparents. I mean, there's the transgenerational traumas that we
Mm-hmm.
are carrying, whether we like it or not. But are there things that we can do to prevent trauma in our children, in the next generation?
That is such a great question. And yes, I think so. I think we need to remember that we're social beings. We need to be around people. You can have, you know, there was just on the island that I live in, there was recently a house that caught on fire, and the person wasn't home, thank goodness, so they're totally fine. But there was a, it was this father and son were the first ones on the scene. So the son is
Mm.
19, and they kept the fire from spreading. The two of them together, they were, watching, because there was trees and it could have, spread. They couldn't save the house. They had to wait for the fire department to come, but they were there together because their house was just down the road. Imagine that.
Mhm.
I was asking them about it, like, how are you feeling? Like, I'm thinking, like, let's do maybe some somatic exercises, because to me, that would feel traumatic. They were fine. They were really empowered. They were really proud. It was a bonding experience. They just felt like
Mhm.
heroes and amazing,
Mhm.
right? Now, imagine the
Mhm.
same scenario, but it's one person all on their own. That could be significantly more traumatic. It depends on the person, right? Like Gabor Mate says, Dr. Gabor Mate is Canadian. He says, trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens within you. So
Mhm.
each person is different depending on their resiliency. So, coming back to your question, is helping children to be resilient, I think, would help a lot. Not doing everything for them, helping them solve their own problems, exposing them to situations that they can sort out and figure out. Like one of the a very common theme with IFS, when we're finally at that inner child and we're doing the coaching and the mentoring, because all of these strange ways that we protect ourselves as adults, if that child was just mentored, let's just say, so a really big theme would be feeling not good enough as an adult.
Mm.
And then that
Mm.
manifests in all sorts of ways. Let's say it's, well, I've got an eating disorder or anorexia, because if I don't have that, I won't get the attention I need. I won't get, and it doesn't matter good or bad, I won't get the attention for being thin enough, and I won't get the attention that people are worried about me for being too thin. Let's just say that. But if that child was taught at an early age, you are good enough, and everyone
Mm.
is good enough, but you need to be aware of this, my child, that there are people in the world that might not recognize that. There are people in the world, they might not think you're good enough, but you are good enough. But you just need to know that there are people who don't see that because they don't feel that they're good enough. If we could explain it like almost like a fairy tale, there's this spell that people are under and they don't think
Mm.
that they're good enough. And so then they'll do things or they'll say things. That way that child's prepared. So in a moment where maybe someone says something to them, oh, like, you know, blah, 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 you're not good enough or you're overweight, whatever that trigger would be that could manifest in that moment, that
Mm-hmm.
child's already prepared.
Mm-hmm.
They know that's not true. Oh, that's the thing that they were telling me about the person that they have wounds, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm already aware of that. So I'm good. And now I don't have to pick that on and go through all of my life, trying to hide this, that I'm not good enough and prove myself. Now I don't need to waste all of that energy.
Wow, yeah, that's a key. That's absolutely key. And not feeling
Right?
good enough. So many of us are walking around with that, me included. Unfortunately, that's still something I need to work. I'm still working on for sure. Now,
But don't you
that
notice, like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I hope
no,
I'm
no.
excited about the next generation because I feel like they're not caring quite as much as we had been
Mm-hmm.
caring. Like, I'm noticing so many youth now who are just,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have sort of that same thing, like, what? Like, you think that about yourself? Like, I know I'm good enough. So I'm really excited. I know it's not everywhere in the world. Some areas it's still, there's lots of progress that needs to be made. But yeah, I'm excited for
Absolutely.
the next generations.
Yeah, it definitely cultural and economics will play a big role in where people are in their emotional development for sure. So I think we're still a long way from having a trauma-free childhood. And while going down this same train of thought, regardless of anything, even if people are able to learn and that they are good enough the way that they are, there's still going to be traumas. We always have things that
Yep.
happen to us. How can we support children in working through traumas? I mean, as adults, we can choose to do that. We can go and help seek out support, be it with a coach, with a therapist, or whatever. But as a child, we do not have those capabilities yet. How can we support a child in working through their traumas and working through their challenges, the fears, the anxieties?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And, um, teaching them some somatic tools would be amazing if that's available to you, like, the gentle trauma release method. If you knew some kind of somatic tool where they could know, okay, something has just happened, because yeah, life goes on, and to really be able to feel their emotions, to be in the body. So any kind of practice
Mhm.
that would help them rather than dissociate or escape, we don't want that. We don't want them to be in that freeze response. That's, so such a disempowered place to be. But to really help teach them, okay, so this happened. How does it make you feel? Where do you feel that in your body? What does that look like to you? Even just that, so that it's not just shoved down and put down into some dungeon somewhere and then manifesting into symptoms. So I would say also, maybe as the parent, just become aware if you're noticing different symptoms showing up.
Mhm.
And, symptoms don't always show up right after a traumatic event either.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
cultivating resilience, because life is going to have hard moments and we need as much resilience as possible. So that would go back to what I was saying before of helping your children become more resilient. And then, teaching them that, and noticing and helping them to be in their body so that they can release that. How amazing would that be if at an early age, when something goes on? Because I'm doing it now. Like, if I'm going through a stressful event in my life or a moment, I'm using my tools daily. I'm like, I
Mhm.
know, okay, the stress is rising, so I've got to keep this down, because more symptoms are going to be, will appear if I don't. So with children, if they knew these things, you can't hurt yourself by doing the gentle trauma release. You can't harm yourself by getting to know
Mhm.
these parts of yourself. Like, how cool would that
Mhm.
be? A
Mhm.
young child realizing, oh, I have this part of me that is trying to protect me by maybe even bullying. What's that about? Oh, well, because I'm feeling scared, whatever it is, whatever they discover. And then
Hmm.
they become more conscious.
Hmm. And of course, there are deeper traumas, particularly when we go through big life events that you just mentioned. One example, and the most classic one, being separation of the parents, divorce,
Yeah.
and and that often is something that for children is incomprehensible, and they put the blame on themselves, and often don't
Yes.
even realize what happened until maybe sometimes years later. I mean, yes, they know there's the anxiety of the separation, there's the back and forth, and they get that part. But the real pain, the real damage often doesn't come until much, much, much later, especially if they were young, and it might not come until they're teenagers. And it becomes like it could be an eating disorder, it could be some kind of psychological problems, right? So, in recognizing those early enough and supporting them, would you say that it's something that the parents do with them together, that they send them to a professional, that they do it with a professional together? Where do you feel that it might be something that would help them the most?
Right. The antidote to trauma is safety. So again, it depends on the situation, because you can go through a divorce and a separation and all of the parents are on like supportive one another, not speaking badly about one another, doing it really consciously and beautifully to help support that child. And yet that child could still end up for some reason blaming themselves, as children do,
Mm-hmm.
and holding that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to put so much pressure on parents because, you know, there's no, you do as best you can, but there's going to be moments, right, where that child's going to just take something the wrong way. I'm going to cough. Excuse me. So I would say, as early as you can, explaining to the child what they can do with what they feel, and also allowing the child to have their emotions, how that
Mm-hmm.
old parenting technique of, well, if you're mad, go to your room and be by yourself. That was awful, right? So it's allowed. This is allowed.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
to have emotions and express them. Gabor Mate calls it the four irreducible needs that we all have as children. Is
Mm-hmm.
one is to express fully all of your emotions. So that would be one. And then, I think at a certain point, it's helpful for a child to not have maybe the parent be the coach or therapist, have a neutral person in their corner, whether that's teen years. Like, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's a wonderful thing if people can, if that's possible for everyone. I think
Mm-hmm.
having someone in your corner is wonderful. And sometimes that might be someone outside of the family who can be neutral, especially if it's that you need help with your family. So you can't go to your family.
Mm-hmm.
There can be a lot of
Mm-hmm.
enmeshment that's unhealthy with family, members. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes parents, they can have a bit of an agenda without realizing it. So that can be hard to catch yourself, right? To know, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, am I really showing up for my child from with no agenda, or do I have a little bit here because really what I'm wanting is this to change about them? Well, then it
Mm-hmm.
might be time to have somebody else come in if that child is open to it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
What can I do if have someone in my circle, be it family, friends, whatever, that I know that they are carry deep pain, great trauma, but they are
Mhm.
not able to see and recognize it? How can I create a loving and healing space for them until they're able to get help? Or how can I gently push them towards getting that support?
That is, there would be a long answer to that one. It totally depends. I know, right? We just want people in our lives to get the help that they need. And for some reason there might be some resistance there. People can be scared to go into it. They can really have a lot of fear. Like, well, I don't want to go working on this for years and years, or thinking that it's impossible, or they're so identified with their trauma they can't imagine their life without it. So there can just know that if all of your attempts aren't working, that it's not your fault. Some people have to really hit a rock bottom moment for them to finally do the work. And we have to watch ourselves as helpers and empaths to uh, kind of stay in our lane. And I think it's a beautiful thing to offer that support for that person to know that you're there, but at the same time, having really healthy boundaries for yourself. Because here's the thing, and I don't know if this is what your situation is, but if we talk to that person like if they need to be fixed, like if they need us to fix them, we are actually disempowering them more. So the best way that you can help someone is talk to them like if they're completely capable of getting out of it, of calling up a counselor and booking an appointment and doing it themselves. That is the best. So you can have that conversation. If you need help, this is what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm noticing from the outside. I care about you. I love you. You know, I want the best for you. I don't want to cross any lines here, but I just want you to know this is my concerns. And then it would be up to them what they do with that. And sometimes that's really hard to see and watch. But yeah, it readiness is everything. I've had a few times where like family members booked an appointment for a family member, and then like that person doesn't show up, or they're just not into it. It's not the right time.
Then it's counterproductive.
Yeah.
Sandika, I feel that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because you may have data that says otherwise, but my feeling is, or my sense is, that women have come such a long way and they're so able and capable of seeking help and seeking the support that they need when they need it. And that men are still so afraid of taking that first step. How can we help empowering men to show them that getting support is also a strength and not a weakness?
It's a beautiful question, because that's also really close to my heart, as I see a lot of men in my own life and in my community that really are isolated, which is not helpful. Really isolated and alone with their pain, and that there's a lot of challenges in relationships with women too that are causing it to be even harder. So I think as women, we do have an advantage there, in that we are so social, and we have all these groups and women's circles and things that we get together and we just talk, whereas men, it's not quite as much. But I do notice that more and more men are starting to seek support and help, and realizing how important it is. I think some of the stigma is changing in lots of places in the world. But for the women who are doing the work and healing themselves and becoming more empowered, I think it's so important for us to then use that gift to support men, in that we stop showing up in relationships with men in some of the toxic ways that we have shown up with men. And changing our side of the dynamic to support men, because I've heard it from so many men where they don't have a safe place, even in the relationship, in their home, to talk about anything. They just need to be perfect, pretty much. And that's just not possible for anyone, and it's unfair and
Mm-hmm.
it's unrealistic, and we need to change. I think absolutely we need to be supportive of men and create those safe spaces. And I like that there's more men groups being created. I think that's really important for men to support men to support young men. I'm hoping that that shifts more, but I guess any men in your life, I would just say to anyone listening, any men in your life, to just listen. If they are sharing, listen. Don't
Mm-hmm.
interrupt. Don't give your 2 cents. Don't give your advice. Really listen. Ask questions. That would be so supportive uh, of a good first step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is of course the key part of what I'm wanting to work on and to bring to young men in particular. I think that it starts with a younger generation. I already see it with my own children. My older sons are already quite different to my youngest son. My youngest son is so open and so make allows himself to be vulnerable, but not in a weak way, but in a very masculine, strong way, and but also beautiful. While my older boys are still very much closed off, and that is not a reflection of their bad habits, but of my parenting. So that is something where I can just also see, where I have done my part to create these traumas already at when they were younger. And that has also been my parenting itself has been an evolution, has been a part of growth, and that is something, of course, that is now very close to my heart. How can I help heal even those close to me, the wounds that I've created myself in a way? But for all the younger men, I think that is something what drives me now. How can I help younger men not even get to that place in the first place? I do have some signature questions for all of my guests. If you had the opportunity to travel back in time and speak to your younger self, what would you tell your younger self?
This is like my ideal question, and it fits with what we've all been talking about. Did you decide this question after our conversation? Oh, so many things. So many things. Goodness. I would really tell her that there is no rush. There is no rush. I think growing up, I always just thought that there was, this timeline. I needed to get to this point at this time. I would say that there's no rush. Just enjoy the journey. And I would tell her, I think that the place that I grew up and just the places that I was as a child, I always felt like I didn't belong there. And I would tell her that's true. And it's not that there's anything wrong with you, but you have a journey that you're going to go on, and you don't belong here. And if you felt like you belonged here, you would stay here. So that's actually
Mhm.
not about you. It's actually a beautiful gift to help push you to go to some different places and have these different experiences, and that's okay. I think, yeah, as a young kid, you see how everyone else is doing it, and you think, well, why is that not fitting for me? Why am I not
Mhm.
just staying in this town, getting married after high school and having all the kids? How come that's not my path? And I would just tell her, it's okay. Just there's no there's no time. You got all the time in the world. Just enjoy yourself.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you. Is there something that you would have liked to hear from your father that you never had the opportunity to hear?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. Yes. I'm one of those lucky people. I have two fathers. So I have my bio dad, and then I have a really amazing stepfather. But what I would have wanted to hear from my dad growing up, that's a question.
Or even in your adult life?
In
What
my
would you
adult,
have, what is, it doesn't matter. You choose. What would you have liked to hear that never was said?
I think for me personally, it would have been, I would really like to hear or just known that dad was there if I needed him, that I could call him and, you know, he would be able to basically be my knight in shining armor if I needed it, if I was in trouble or if something was going wrong with the house or something. Maybe that's so stereotypical, but that would would have been what I wanted. That wasn't what I had as growing up with my dad, just because of his own
Mm-hmm.
struggles. He wasn't able to be that for me. So that would have been amazing. Just a dad who was present and that I would have felt really safe to talk to and go to rather than, what it was, which was more me
Mm-hmm.
trying to help him. So it would have been more
Mm-hmm.
someone like, no, you don't need to help. My stuff is here. Like, I'm dealing with my stuff. So you can just totally be at peace about that. Even if it's not all worked out, but I'm on it. It's not your
Mm-hmm.
burden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My last question to you is, what do you do for yourself to stay centered, to stay in that self-love, in that creativity, in that what drives you forward?
So many things. Nature is really important and socializing is really important to me. I'm realizing that more as we're going into winter and it's quieter. Uh, Connecting with people, setting up walks with friends. It's just these simple things that I have to really remind myself ahead of time. Okay, I need to, make sure I have enough of that going on to fill my cup up. And dancing. Dancing is definitely one of them. Like, if I can just go out dancing or dance at home, just wipes the slate clean and fills that joy tank. So lots of things like that. Being in the body, exercise. Exercise is super important, and yeah, walking.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
Sandika, it was lovely having you here on the show today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for taking the time. It was really lovely to be a part of this conversation, especially, talking about children and the men's side of the relationships and their specific needs. I loved hearing about that, and I'm glad that you're doing this work. I think it's so important.
Thank you so much, Sandika. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for taking the time and listening to my podcast today. If you want to learn more about me, check out my website, www.fatherhoodfromtheheart.com. There you will find information about my coaching offers and approach. I would be honored to accompany you on your path, be it on your own or with a parent, partner, daughter, or son. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to this podcast and link, and share this episode so that more can hear, learn, and grow from the wisdom of my guests. I would also be incredibly grateful if you could rate and review the show, and please don't forget to leave a comment. I will end the show for now, but remember to be kind to yourself. Until next time, I say goodbye and send love and gratitude from my heart to yours.